Hi, I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and I'm with Paige Albiniak, contributing writer for TV News Check, and we are talking TV. Hi, Paige. Good to see you again.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
Very well on this pandemiversary week of the
And
world
St.
shutting
Patrick's
down,
Day. I
and
sort of
St.
will
Patrick's
agree.
Day week. Exactly. So, very good to see you. And you have a very, very interesting story for us this week that you've done on social media platforms and TV news stations, where they are using those platforms most predominantly and how they're using them. And probably to no one's great surprise, Facebook remains the most popular platform by overwhelmingly by TV station groups. Um, Again, that's not a surprise, but that relationship has evolved, as you find somewhat. But I'm wondering, why is it still the dominant platform? There's so many problems with it, so many issues, and yet it remains so important to TV stations. Why?
I don't know if I have the best answer as to why people are still on Facebook. I don't know that all the news about Facebook and the issue with Russia or the political fights that people get into or the toxicity, all of that goes on Facebook. Uh, but I think the news about that driving people away from the platform is overblown because I think at the end of the day, people's friends and their family and their interest groups are still on Facebook. So what that means is, and also if you leave it, then you lose all that. So even if you're mad at Facebook, it's hard to leave that community. And then if you're a TV station, I'm going to use the WTBT Channel 13 in Tampa, the Fox station, because they have a really strong Facebook group. It's almost 3 million, might be more than 3 million people. And once you've accrued that kind of audience, it's just not something you can walk away from. And, as Adam Weiner says from CBS, you got to fish where the fish are, and the fish are on Facebook.
Yeah.
So as a result, that's where stations are. Now, I heard different numbers about the percentage of the audience, and I couldn't find actual study that verified it. But anecdotally, I think it's 30%. Now, that's really loose. If somebody wants to come back to me and say, no, it's this, fine, I'm here to hear that. But it's, there's a lot of people for them on Facebook, so they need to be there.
But Facebook remains, it's a lot of work to manage it successfully. And people do it in
all of it is a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of time and investment that you have to spend, not just creating the posts, but interacting with your audience there, which of course is kind of the greatest value of the platform, that they can communicate most directly with their audiences on it. But at the end of the day, it remains the case still that TV stations and really most media groups are not able to monetize their presence on that platform to anywhere near the extent that they could potentially on their owned and operated digital platforms. So how have they come to some sort of reconciliation with that, or have they come to that reconciliation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that is twofold. I think one, initially when the social media platforms came online and as they accrued larger and larger audiences, then of course business people at businesses are going to say, this is huge audiences, tons of reach, what a business opportunity this is, if only we can figure out a way to monetize it. And then it became a platform battle, who lives on what platform. What everyone's come to realize is that Facebook's audience is Facebook's audience, and they're going to live on Facebook. So your goal is to then somehow convert them to come to your platform. Now, I think Sarah Ziegler, and I might be saying her name wrong, but at NBC talked about how even still, Facebook and other social media platforms are not traffic drivers per se, but it's one tool in the toolbox. So your job then is to make sure that your websites, your apps, wherever you're driving them to, are able to monetize that traffic. So it's tertiary monetization stream. It's not you're not going to directly monetize them, but you don't know what you're losing if you don't have them there. And I think also Sarah said this about being in the zeitgeist. You could not be there, but at your own peril, because you're not in the zeitgeist, you're not in the conversation, you're not contributing, you're not relevant. So you might not be seeing direct ROI, but you're certainly seeing engagement. You're certainly seeing it's occurring back to your brand. There's lots of reasons to be there that don't have a direct relationship with ROI.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to think of anybody who wouldn't maintain a presence on Facebook. I mean, it's inconceivable that a station, I think, would not be there. Probably there may be none in the country that are abstaining from it. But of course, the act of driving, that's driving from Facebook off that platform to their own is the trick. Just
Yeah.
getting how you induce people to take that action and go off the platform is an art, I suppose. Some are probably much better at than others.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little part in the story that I wrote, and I've touched on this when I did the CMS story too. Some of that is again about keeping all your social media plates spinning, and then separately making sure that that you're completely taking advantage of your Google search optimization,
SEO,
so that and all your streams, that you're doing everything you can to drive people to your platform and then monetizing from there. And then another piece of this, which you probably get into anyway, but about having your talent, when your talent is doing stuff on social media, that also kind of funnels back in, and that your talent, and as well as your station, are making connections or engaging with an audience or creating brand loyalty, are making people feel like, oh, these are my friends and I need to hang out with my friends. So then maybe as a result, they will come watch you on TV because they like you and they want to hang out with you. I mean, it seems simple. It's not, social media isn't, there's a lot of talk about strategy and all of that, but a lot of it is about emotion. It's about, how do you connect? How do you create a community? Are these my friends? Do I get a little serotonin hit when I go there? It's not that complicated. And that's the feeling that people are trying to take advantage of on social media and use to drive back as audience.
Right, right. Well, I'm glad you brought up talent because, of course, there's not just the main channel from a given news outlet. They may also have a weather subset page, and then, of course, lots of the individual talent will have their own pages as well. And since the advent of social media, some people in newsrooms have been ringers on that front and others haven't. But the fact is that there's the umbrella of the station, and then underneath that, myriad different accounts. So when you were talking to the half a dozen or so station groups for this story, how, if at all, are they managing the talent and keeping track? How do they police all of that stuff?
So I will say up front that this is an area that I would have liked to have dug into more and talked to talent and done a little more with, but I didn't have time so much. So let's just talk about it generally. I think that kind of like the idea of social media initially, like this giant audience, we should be able to monetize. I also think that stations and other businesses thought, oh, we should force our talent onto these platforms. And I think how it's evolved is they've realized that doesn't work. As Chris, I cannot pronounce his last name, it's Boex from WTVT, said, we did require our talent to post, and it resulted in boring and inauthentic posts. Mm-hmm. So they ultimately were like, your social media feeds are up to you. The platforms you use are up to you. Some people really resonate with Instagram, others with Twitter. Use the ones you want. I feel like in terms of new platforms, that talent tends to be what they rely on. So like TikTok, that tends to be more of a talent platform than a station platform. And, you mentioned before, it's very time consuming to maintain social media feeds. And I actually want to throw it out there. If you're a person who manages TV stations or any business, realize that managing social media it's not just like throwing up some tweets. I always feel like people think that, and I'm like, it is something you have to manage. It is definitely time consuming. Anyway, but I think that what they try to do is make sure that they highlight their talents, that are the talent that's doing it well, and they take advantage of it, but they really let them manage their own feeds and only step in if absolutely necessary.
Right, right. And then, and there's also just the management of the general, I mean, the comment threads on any given post, whatever it is, however innocuous as your reporting revealed, and we've all probably seen.
As we all know, yeah.
It devolves into a cesspit very, very quickly. And so I know this came up. How are stations and station groups more generally dealing with that? Because you've got a real problem when you've got this toxic conversation happening under the auspices of your brand or adjacent to your brand. And on their own and operating problems, they could just kill the comments if they wanted to. But on Facebook, you've got these enormous devolved kind of threads that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't want to kill the comments even when they get crazy like that, because there is a First Amendment They are news gathering operations. They value free speech. They profess a value for free speech. So that means I don't just get to go kill comments I don't like. You know, what people said, and again, this was Chris at WTBT in Tampa, that, you know, he kind of tries to push, you know, gently nudge the conversation elsewhere. He did say that a lot of times the other people on the threads will come in and kind of manage it. So I think some of it is self-policing. They will kill comments that are blatantly offensive, insulting, you know, slanderous, things that could potentially cause them legal problems. But otherwise, I think they try to let the conversation flow. Another interesting thing that my friend Chris said is that he likes to use Instagram in particular for direct messaging, and that they get a lot of useful comments, feedback, news tips, etc. that way. And they really try to respond to those comments because it's just another way to show that you're engaging with your community. And I do think that TV stations in particular were already, even before social media started, they were already well suited to engage on these platforms because they always have been very connected with their communities. So for them, these tools are just ways to further those connections and have them be more constant.
Well, the comment threads, I think this came up in your story, and I know it came up in a conversation I had fairly recently with Fox, that they can become fodder, even if it's something wildly uninformed, that's fodder for a story to debunk that, or to fact check, or to, you know, obviously people have some misguided idea about something perhaps, and it's being perpetuated. You see it in the comments, they can go address that directly in the story. So it can feed their story pipeline as well.
That is absolutely true. And that's what Chris of Tampa said, and that they'll maybe even would be a national story. I did not talk to this person for the story, but I've talked to him a lot, Adam Ostroff at Tegna. But, you know, Tegna has that whole, I forget exactly what the initiative called.
Verify.
It's about fact checking. Yeah, Verify. Yeah. So that's basically like where I think Verify stemmed from too. These things came up, and, you know, is it conspiracy? Is it real? And so as a result, Tegna goes out and does a story, and then they can use that to prove or disprove, which I think is useful and is really part of your mission. And, you know, another thing about that is Chris Sepper at Scripps said that, you know, one of the big reasons they use social media is to shine a spotlight on their local journalism. And I think that's another really key piece of the mission for stations, that it's beyond monetization and brand augmentation and all that stuff. It is about how are you serving the community through your journalism. I think that's really core to what stations do.
Right. I just want to mention, I'm talking to Adam Ostroff, and the new head of Verify. Verify has grown so much inside of Tegna. They scaled it out across the country, and it iterates at every station as well as nationally. So we're going to do an executive session with those two folks later this month. I want to just ask you lastly about other platforms. And I mean, this article dwelled so much on Facebook because that's where they're spending so much time and effort, but you also have Instagram, Twitter, and emerging TikTok to some degree. So how are they using those different platforms at stations to scratch different itches?
I mean, I think that they use those platforms just like kind of everybody else does, but this was also a Chris Sepper quote, that Facebook is really about community. Instagram is about creating visual joy, which I like that phrase. Yeah. Twitter is for news junkies. And so if you're a person that wants to tweet out your stories, like that's where you do that. You don't really do it on your personal Facebook page. And I have to say, in my own life, that's how I use it too. I find that people on Facebook do not care about whatever news I've been doing that day, but Twitter cares a little bit more. TikTok is really, it's not a place where stations are really at. I think it's a weird place for them. It's really not very business focused platform. So, you know, I think it's talent doing stuff personally, like here's my dog, here's me making breakfast, whatever it is that they're doing. And then another platform I didn't really get into at all, but somebody mentioned is Clubhouse. And so Clubhouse, if people don't know, is this audio platform. It's kind of like people gather in rooms and have conversations like this, and then you can join the rooms and listen into the different conversations, which we'll see where that goes. But, you know, considering that stations are a place where they're doing a lot of reporting, I think, and are already an audio and visual medium, I think Clubhouse could be an interesting place for stations to be. You know, they could set up a local room and have some kind of community forum. You know, there's some ideas there.
So kind of an audio version of Facebook groups kind of thing, where it's a more focused.
Maybe.
heard it.
I
I've
mean, I
heard
have to say, yeah, I have not been on Clubhouse myself.
Yeah.
But that's my understanding of what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think there's opportunities. I do think, just going back to what you said about social media being a lot of work, I think stations are also like, you know, we have limited time and resources, and they aren't directly monetizing. So how do we want to spend our time? And so you allocate accordingly. So you try to keep your plate spinning across the platforms. You focus on Facebook. Being like, oh, I need to also be on TikTok and try out Clubhouse and maybe do Snapchat. Like it starts to diversify you too much. So you really have to focus on what you can and do well.
At some point, you got to make a newscast too.
Yeah, I mean, those
8
are
to 10
separate
hours
teams,
of it.
really, but yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, social is not going away for TV news organizations.
Not for any of us, everybody.
And
Social's here to stay.
So we've got to make our peace with it. It sounds like there is an evolved understanding, though, that has emerged after many years of being on these platforms, especially Facebook. There's more reconciliation to its permanence and a little bit more of it's certainly much more of a honed presence there, and a lot of years of experience under stations' belts. So,
I mean, crazy thing is Facebook's really only been a thing since like 2009. So that's what, 13 years? I mean, if you just, which seems long, but also incredibly short.
Yeah, but it's a rapid evolution, and
Yeah.
And it's key. So thank you so much, Paige. Interesting story. I encourage everyone to take a look at it, and see you again soon. Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye, Michael.
Bye.